Welcome to yet another episode from the Sustainability Channel. I'm Thomas Stanley and I'm your host. So let's have a look at today's news update. And we're starting with an article from Forbes and a piece from their contributor Timothy McClement, while writing about risk management that will overtake ESG and DEI in 2024. During the past 5 years, certain concepts and phrases such as environmental, social governance, ESG, and diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, have risen exponentially with corporate and non-profit leaders, while others, like social responsibility, philanthropy, and citizenship, have faded from the management lexicon. With an US presidential election year in full swing, expect to see a reversal of fortune for some of these social labels and the creation or resurrection of new and perhaps less controversial substitutes. So according to the author, here are 3 trends worth watching in 2024. The rise of corporate citizenship. Originally advanced by institutional investors and now generally accepted by many corporate and government leaders, ESG has become a hot button issue and a favorite punching bag of the conservative academic and political right. While concepts such as good governance practices, fair treatment of employees, and a responsibility to the quality of life in communities are generally favored by politicians and professors of all stripes, other aspects of ESG, such as fighting climate change, promoting social justice, and equal hiring and promotion practices, have taken on political connotations and risks that are causing many companies and institutions to change the way that they talk about these issues and practices. Expect to see a rise in more traditional terms like corporate citizenship, corporate responsibility, without the social as in corporate social responsibility, and corporate philanthropy as less controversial and polarizing terms, while these programs and priorities remain largely the same. Interesting. And on second place, we have the rise of wellness and belonging. Similarly, DEI programs, which have seen exponential growth in recent years, are under attack as un-American, ineffective, and discriminatory by a growing chorus of politicians, academics, and think tank leaders. While corporate leaders have signaled that they are not cutting back on these efforts, which remain critical to the businesses, expect to see a rise in efforts to promote employee wellness, belonging, and mental health as ways of ensuring that all current and future employees feel safe, fairly treated, and valued. And on third place, the rise of risk management. Risk management, or the process by which companies and institutions identify, evaluate, and mitigate their exposure to potential losses or liabilities, has been a non-controversial aspect of corporate governance for as long as businesses have existed, and more emphasis continues to be placed here by corporate boards and leaders. Arguably, corporate efforts to identify and mitigate risks associated with climate change, changing demographics, quality of life issues in communities, and workplace policies and practices are all essential and generally accepted as important priorities for institutional leaders and will remain so. Expect to see more instances where these ESG and DEI strategies are framed as managing risks associated with doing business rather than as freestanding programs and priorities. George Orwell once wrote, "When the general atmosphere is bad, language must suffer." It remains to be seen whether the current polarized environment, especially in an election year, brings changes to corporate language or programs, or both. Stay tuned. Interesting piece from Timothy McClement. And we're also having a look at PwC CEO Survey, Sustainability Takeaways from Leading Executives. A large number of CEOs think their companies are in trouble, according to this survey. More than 2,000 chief executives polled by the PwC say their company won't be economically viable within the next 10 years as pressures build from climate disruption and AI. Chief executives are less concerned about short-term worries like inflation and economic growth in 2024. Expectations for growth are up this year, actually, but are more worried about the long-term impact of climate change and on AI on their business. A higher proportion of the 4,700 CEOs surveyed this year say that in the face of climate disruption and AI, they think their company will not last a decade without reinvention. And lastly, we have a look at the bulletin of the atomic scientists and their Doomsday Clock, which has just been updated. So what is the Doomsday Clock? Yeah, it's founded in 1945 by Albert Einstein, Robert Oppenheimer, and University of Chicago scientists who helped develop the first atomic weapons in the Manhattan Project. The Bulletin of the Atomic Scientist created a doomsday clock 2 years later using the imagery of apocalypse, midnight, and the contemporary idiom of nuclear explosion, countdown to zero, to convey threats to humanity and the planet. The doomsday clock is set every year by the Bulletin's Science and Security Board in consultation with its board of sponsors, which includes 9 Nobel laureates. The clock has become a universally recognized indicator of the world's vulnerability to global catastrophe caused by human-made technologies. So, how does it look this year? A moment of historic danger. It is still 90 seconds to midnight, according to this organization. Ominous trends continue to point the world toward global catastrophe. The war in Ukraine and the widespread and growing reliance on nuclear weapons increase the risk of nuclear escalation. China, Russia, and the United States are all spending huge sums to expand or modernize their nuclear arsenals, adding to the ever-present danger of nuclear war through mistake or miscalculation. In 2023, Earth experienced its hottest year on record, and massive floods, wildfires, and other climate-related disasters affected millions of people around the world. Meanwhile, rapid and worrisome developments in the life sciences and other disruptive technologies accelerated, while governments made only feeble efforts to control them. The members of the Science and Security Board have been deeply worried about the deteriorating state of the world. That is why we set the doomsday clock at 2 minutes to midnight in 2019 and at 100 seconds to midnight in 2022. Last year, we expressed our heightened concern by moving the clock to 90 seconds to midnight, the closest to global catastrophe it has ever been, in large part because of Russian threats to use nuclear weapons in the war in Ukraine. Today, we once again set the doomsday clock at 90 seconds to midnight because humanity continues to face an unprecedented level of danger. So read this whole article where they're explaining more, but in the end, they also have some tips on how to avoid this threat, how to turn back the clock. As the first step, and despite their profound disagreements, 3 of the world's leading powers, the United States, China, and Russia, should commence serious dialogue about each of the global threats outlined in the article. At the highest levels, these 3 countries need to take responsibility for the existential danger the world now faces. They have the capacity to pull the world back from the brink of catastrophe. They should do so with clarity and courage, and without delay. So this was all from today, from the Sustainability Channel. Over and out, and live a sustainable life.